On this bonus edition of Locked On Mets, I'm going to break down every single pick the Mets made on day 2 of the MLB Draft.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at JustBaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, this is technically part 2 of the show today. I decided to break it up into a 2-part episode because I wanted to spend a full show on Pete Alonso, not just his performance in the home run derby, which was not great, but talking about the narratives that can change on a player in a contract year, how fans can sour on some quickly, how the media can come at a player differently, and how is it all going to play out for Pete now that he's past the derby, soon to be past the All-Star break, and hopefully in 2 weeks, still in that beyond the deadline. What's that all going to look like? What's his second half going to be? And is he going to be with the Mets long term? So if you want to check out that episode, do so after this one, breaking down everything from day 2 of the draft. So on yesterday's show, I talked about the first 2 picks that the Mets made. Carson Bench, who they drafted with the 19th overall pick, has been very widely regarded as a great pick. Every scout that you're out there is, that's great value for the Mets. At JustBaseball.com, as I talked about on that show yesterday, we rank all the prospects going into the draft, and Bench was our number 11 prospect. So the Mets getting him at 19, that is some really good value, a potential 5-tool center fielder who's still technically a 2-way player. That speaks volumes to the arm strength that he could bring to right field, even if that's ultimately the position that becomes his home. But there is a lot of upside with that pick, and Carson Bench is really going to be that pillar, that foundation that's going to make this a really good draft class. As far as I'm concerned, I think he might even be, by the end of the season, as we're going into next year, I think there's a pretty decent shot that Carson Bench might be a top 10 prospect in this organization. Now, with the second pick, they drafted Jonathan Santucci, who we talked about yesterday, a left-handed pitcher who's got really good stuff. The Mets do not have a prized left-handed pitching prospect in their system right now, that the hope is that Santucci can be that guy. As we look at the 8 picks the Mets made on day 2, there's a lot of high upside right-handed pitchers who the Mets are gambling on to go into their organization with their new pitching lab. And the hope is the Mets can become something of a pitching factory where they can turn these guys into really good big leaguers. The Astros were able to do this for some time there, where they're able to just manufacture some relief pitchers, manufacture some starting pitchers. They did great on signing, some guys. If you look at Christian Javier and Framber Valdez, signing guys for next to nothing in the international market, and all of a sudden they developed them into really good pitchers. So I think that's the hope here, right? You're getting a lot of different arms that are going to go through your lab and go through your system that you hope can develop into good starters, if nothing else or nothing less, nasty relief pitchers. So we're going to start with the 3rd round pick for the Mets at number 82, and that is Nate Dome from Mississippi State. Now, Dome is a 21-year-old, electric stuff. He pitched to a 1.23 ERA with 37 strikeouts and just 4 walks in 29 1/3 innings pitched. Now, there was some that had him as a day 1 draft pick, so going in the first 2 rounds. But some arm injuries that limited him in college probably dropped his stock a little bit, so the Mets get him in the 3rd round. Really good value there. Hopefully they can sign him. And I think he is, outside of Santucci, when you're looking at the right-hander in our sense, so Santucci being a lefty, Dome is clearly the guy that they're probably looking at as one that they hope can maybe even stick in the rotation if they can develop him properly, but a guy that has a ton of upside that they're betting on. Let's move to the 4th round pick. At number 111, the Mets got Eli Serrano III out of NC State. Now, on yesterday's show, we talked about a connection between Carson Bench and Nolan McLean, teammates at Oklahoma State, both 2-way players. Now, there's another common theme here, connection, and that's with Serrano and Ryan Clifford. Ryan Clifford being the prospect the Mets got, or the other prospect, along with Drew Gilbert, in the Justin Verlander trade last year. These 2 guys were teammates at the same prep academy in high school. So now they joined forces, and Serrano is a similar player to Clifford. Big kid. He's 6'5". He started off college at first base. They moved him to center field, so that speaks to his athleticism. And I imagine that helped him, with his draft stock to be able to show that he can play in center. We'll see if he sticks out there, if he ends up moving to a corner, or if he ends up being back at first base. But there is a lot of upside in this pick. And remember, Chris Gross, who is running the Mets draft, he was in Houston. He picked Ryan Clifford in the 11th round, and they paid him overslot to get him to sign. Now you have a chance with Serrano to plug in a similar archetype into this system. And I imagine Gross is looking at this kid and thinking, all right, we can get some more power there. We can build it up. We can develop that. He hit 285 at NC State this past season with a 380 on base, 431 slug. So if you're hitting 280, that's pretty solid. Getting on base at a 380 clip. If the discipline's there and you have a 6'5" kid, the hope is that you can really work on that swing path, work on ironing everything out, and being able to tap into power that right now is not there. Only hit 9 home runs, but you hope that one day it can be. So that's the motivation behind this pick. It's not going to be entirely easy to get him to sign because he was a sophomore out of NC State. He can go back and try to raise his draft stock. And if he can go from a 4th round pick to a 2nd round pick, that's going to be a huge difference in his signing bonus when it comes to the slot value of those picks. Are the Mets going to have to pay Serrano 2nd round money to get him to sign? I don't know. But if you're going to look at some guys in this draft that might have to get paid over slot to get them to sign, I think Serrano is definitely one of them. The other one is the 5th round pick the Mets made at number 144, and that is Trey Snyder. This is the only high school player they've drafted so far. And you got to wonder, has the NIL impacted that at all? Being able to get paid in college. I don't know what a Trey Snyder gets to go play baseball at Tennessee. I'm not sure how much money that really is. But when you add that to the bucket of a decision that a kid has to make, going pro right away and playing baseball in the minor leagues where it's not always packed stadiums, it's not always exciting. It's grinding in the South Florida heat and proving yourself and trying to move along in the Mets farm system. That might not be as fun as going to Tennessee and being a superstar and still hitting with an aluminum bat and being a stud shortstop and potentially getting to compete in the College World Series. There's a lot that comes with getting a chance to play in college. And I think the NIL is going to get more kids to turn down Major League Baseball in the beginning, decide to develop in college first and improve their draft stock and find themselves, if you're Trey Snyder, a 1st round pick in a couple of years after enjoying this great college experience. I think that's why you're seeing some less high school guys going early. There's still going to be guys that get paid over slot, and maybe you're going to see high school players get paid more now in the draft process because they have an even better option than they used to going to college. So that's just something to monitor. I think that if Trey Snyder signs, he might get as much money as pretty much anybody outside of Carson Bench. Like I could see him signing for more than a lot of these guys, especially as a 5th round pick. Now, to get into who he is as a player, he's a shortstop. He was the Missouri High School Gatorade Player of the Year, hitting .391 with 7 home runs, 36 RBIs, and 22 stolen bases. Had an OPS over 1,100 during his senior season, and he is regarded as a great defensive shortstop. Really good athlete. So the ability to stick it short, if that holds up throughout his development, that's just going to raise your floor as a prospect, especially because a shortstop could then potentially play anywhere if you need him to. So when you have the defensive home sort of checked off that box, it does make everything else fall in line. He also had some of the best exit velocities among the high school draft picks. So it's a huge upside play here to get him to turn down his commitment to Tennessee. And I would say outside of Carson Bench, probably the most upside in the draft so far for the Mets with Trey Snyder. I'd say him and Serrano are sort of neck and neck in that regard, with Bench clearly being the top pick up to this point and going to be the top pick in this class. All right, so there's 4 more picks to discuss. I'm going to break those down in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. The Mets are going to be in Miami for a 4-game set starting this Friday, and I will be there in attendance on Friday. So if you want to come say hello to me, go to Booking.com, book your stay. Don't just do it for me, but do it for yourself. Get yourself a nice summer vacation. It's just a scorching, it's hot down here, but you know what? There's beaches. The ballpark has a nice dome. It's air conditioned. Come on out. It's fun to watch the Mets right now. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. So book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. After the draft on Monday, I sent over to the insiders a text for each pick in this draft. So they got a lot of the information you're getting now in text form first before anybody else. So that is the perk of being a Locked On Mets insider. You can find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, round 6, pick number 173. The New York Mets drafted Corey Collins out of Georgia. And this pick screams underslot. You pair it with Snyder back to back, and it just makes sense because this is a senior bat out of Georgia, but a pretty damn good one, and one that could end up being a really good pick for the Mets. Just not one you necessarily have to pay a ton when it comes to the signing bonus. He's a left-handed slugger. He hit 20 home runs in 52 games playing for the Georgia Bulldogs. He was the second hitter on that team to Charlie Condon, who went number 3 overall. Very good lineup. He had an OPS over 1,300, hit 354, 574 on base percentage. Say that again, 574 on base percentage. That's nuts. 772 slug. Well, when you hit 20 home runs in 52 games, yeah, that's going to play. Obviously, he was a senior hitter in college with an aluminum bat. Okay. Don't expect him to hit 20 home runs in his first 52 games with a wood bat in St. Lucie in Brooklyn next year. Probably not going to happen. But the fact that there's power here, you like that. Caught some, but probably first baseman in the minor leagues. Hoping to latch on there. Moving forward, a guy that could fly through the system, though. I mean, there is absolutely that chance that Corey Collins can move very quickly as a senior bat. Round 7, pick number 203, right-handed pitcher Will Watson out of USC. Now, Watson transferred to USC for his junior year, pitched to a 3.93 ERA over 15 1/3 innings pitched with 46 strikeouts. So pretty decent numbers. They don't blow you away. He served as both a starter and a reliever, so there's definitely some reliever risk here, but I think the hope is that he's going to be able to stick as a starting pitcher, and he's sort of a 3/4 type release point from Watson. Good athlete, okay, mid-90s fastball, some good breaking pitches, slider, curveball, a nasty changeup. Another guy that the Mets are going to put through that pitching lab and hope that they can turn him into a really good arm. We've seen so many guys this year seeing their stock just skyrocket, from Jonah Tong to Cade Morris, guys that were drafted around that range, right? Not necessarily first-day draft picks, but second-day draft picks that have good stuff, that go through the lab, that are getting developed properly now in this Mets system, who could be really good pitchers moving forward. Will Watson has a chance to start, but even if not, there's probably a good reliever here, so another nice pickup. Speaking of good reliever, the 8th round pick for the Mets at number 233 is someone that I want to see in the Mets bullpen this season. I'm only half kidding. He's 21 years old, a relief pitcher, pitched to a 2.57 ERA in his one season at Oklahoma after transferring from Minnesota. Now, he also pitched in the MLB Draft League, which is a 6-team showcase league that takes place from June 4th to July 13th ahead of the draft. Extra chance for these guys to get into a league. I think it's a 35-game schedule. See how you do. Improve your stock, hopefully. In that league, Lambert pitched to a 1.50 ERA in 6 innings with 10 strikeouts, and here's the kicker, no walks. There's been some control issues throughout his college career. So if that holds up, a renewed sense of control of his arsenal for a guy that touched 102 on his fastball and can sit in the upper 90s, had a whiff rate over 30% in the draft league, has a nasty fastball slider combination. Lambert, my prediction, is going to be the first player from this draft class that makes it to the big leagues. That's my prediction. I don't actually believe it's this year, but when you see him in a MLB Draft League, strike out 10 in 6 innings and not walk any, and he's got 102, and he's got a slider that's nasty. It just makes you dream a little bit. So I love the idea here of getting a guy that by 2025, potentially, that's a more likely timetable, if not 2026, but a guy that could fly through your system as just a stuff reliever. Don't have to worry too much about it. You're not going to try to add a third pitch and a fourth. No, your fastball slider, that's what you do. Throw Ched, get strikeouts, get outs. Love this pick of Ryan Lambert at 233. Round 9 at number 263, Jackson Jelin from Houston. Another 21-year-old pitcher, missed 2023 after needing Tommy John surgery that had him miss parts of 2022 as well. Did not complete the 2024 campaign due to arm fatigue. Did make 7 starts. Pitched to a 3.41 ERA, had 46 strikeouts in 34 1/3 innings pitched. Touched 97 with the fastball. Nasty slider that accounted for a lot of those strikeouts. He's got some reliever risk for sure. And there's the health concern, obviously. But I think teams, they look at a guy that got Tommy John in college, and I wouldn't say it's a good thing, but to get that one out of the way, the first one, and now have a chance to develop him right, build him up the proper way, it's a project. But I think the Mets are going to look here at Jackson Jelin with their pick in the 9th round and say, let's try to develop him properly. Let's take our time with him. And he might just be a really good starting pitcher in a couple of years where you think, oh, wow, 9th round pick, Jackson Jelin, he could skyrocket. You don't know. It's draft day. We might not ever talk about Jackson Jelin again. We might not even sign, but definitely you see sort of the vision of what they're looking for with a guy who showed some really good flashes. There's the injury concern that you're going to have to worry about, but potentially another good project for this system. Last pick of day 2, Brendan Gerton. This one is another one that screams underslot. Okay. Gerton's a senior arm and didn't even have good numbers in college. Okay. He does throw hard, comes from Oklahoma, but he spent 3 seasons at Texas Tech, 1 year at Oklahoma. He struck out 47 batters in 35 2/3. That's good. ERA of 7.32, not so good. ERA throughout college of 5.79, bad. Has command issues, walks a lot of guys, but there's stuff that the Mets are betting on here, and probably a reliever, I would think. I don't necessarily believe that they are looking at Brendan Gerton with the ERA that he has and what he did in college. I think that's the guy that we're going to try to build into a starting pitcher. I think it's, all right, what are the two? What are the 2 pitches that you excel at? Let's tweak them. Let's make them as good as we can, and let's go to war with that. See how you do in the minor leagues. See if you can develop another relief pitcher here. You never know. You never know what these picks end up turning into. I imagine with Gerton, he's not going to sign for a lot of money. Same as I said before with the 6th round pick, Corey Collins. When you draft a senior, typically the thought is this is where we can save a little bit of money that we can, divert in other places that you can send to a Trey Snyder or a Eli Serrano. So that's what I imagine this pick was a little bit of. It was an arm that I'm sure they like. They're not just going to draft the guy for no reason. But I think they were probably thinking, okay, of the senior pitchers on the board, who's got the stuff that we like enough that we're going to take a gamble on here that we can sign under slot and still have a project that might just work out for us. So that is my rationale, at least, behind the 10th round pick in this draft. Now, I'm still not sure what I'm going to do for the final 10 rounds of this draft. The MLB draft now is 20 rounds. You also have undrafted guys that end up getting signed as well. If you like this content today, if you liked my extra bonus episode breaking down the draft picks, please let me know in the comment section if it's something you want me to do tomorrow for the final picks of this draft. We're going to talk about, let's see real quick. I can actually pull up my Locked On Mets podcast ideas document. We'll see what we're looking at here. Are there any bats on the market that fit the Mets? So that's going to be the show tomorrow. We're going to be talking trade deadline. Thursday show is going to be bullpen related. 5 teams who could offer the Mets bullpen help at the deadline. So I'm going to go through those 2 different things here throughout the rest of the week, but I will continue to do draft coverage. So let me know if you want to hear about the final 10 picks of this draft, and we'll do some of that tomorrow. Otherwise, I might just rapid fire it for a segment at the end of the Bats show. Make sure if you are listening on the audio side, you follow, you rate, you review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.